It's interesting. It hasn't sunk in. There's like pieces happening one at a time, stages of saying goodbye. Part of it's weird because I feel like, I started off by myself in a room typing it. And, or having with a writer's assistant and certainly with notes. And it feels like it's kind of coming back down to that again. I'm going to be by myself with a pen. So that's interesting. It's made out of the people. So that's the hardest part is 7 years. It's 14 years since I wrote the pilot, which is a third of my life. And just 7 years of production is like no one has a job this long, and we all know each other. And we've had a lot of the people that we started with are still here, which is unusual. And it's pretty emotional. I worked in network TV. It was very similar to advertising. The battle between the creative and the business, commerce versus, creativity. The way creative people behave at work. I knew that, when you ask somebody to do something who's a creative person, you give them a deadline, you do not want to see when the work takes place. If the work is due at 9 in the morning, there's a very good chance that they might start working at 7 in the morning. And that whole sort of disrespect for authority that is tolerated to get creative people to work, I love that. And that was all part of the ad business. And I also kind of wanted to talk about America on the very top, which it was in 1960. I think I said this in the very first EPK, but in 1960, New York City was the world center for finance, literature, drama, television. There were films being made there, publishing. It's just every single thing, the number one spot, and advertising being part of that. And it slowly, as we've told over the show, by 1977, the city's actually bankrupt. So, and what happened? And then it became the stories of the people in it. I didn't know when I started that I'd be doing 92 episodes, the same way I didn't know when I wrote the script that it would take 7 years to get on the air. It's been a gift to sort of go each stage of the way. There was a terror about actually going to cast the show. The script, as I've told you, changed my life, right? It got me this job on The Sopranos. And then it was going to be made, and I had never heard a word of it out loud. And I got a piece of advice from David Chase on the way to my last day in the room on The Sopranos before I did the pilot. I ended up going back, obviously, to finish the show. But he gave me this very valuable piece of advice, which was, and a compliment at the same time. He said, they're going to come in and they're going to read it and you're going to hate it. Don't change it. When the right person comes in, it will work. It's good. The first person comes in, I'm like, okay. First person comes in, reads for Don. I'm listening to it. It sounds really glib and very shallow and a lot like someone imitating an old movie, which I was really afraid of, because I wanted it to sound contemporary. I didn't want it to be abstract. The next person who comes in and reads is Elizabeth Moss. And she left, and I walked into the men's room at this place where we were, and I just looked at myself, and I got very emotional. It was such a relief. I was like, she was great, and she was totally Peggy. And I came back to the casting directors, and I'm like, just if you can give me a couple more people like her, and I'll pick the best. I'll pick the one that I like the best, because it's not always a meritocracy. We'll see. And they're like, there's no one else like her. And Jon Hamm, this is not legend. It's actually true. Jon Hamm came in for his first reading, and he left. And I said to the casting directors, "That's the guy." And when Alan Taylor and I saw him, it was just so clear that he was smart, really handsome, really agile as an actor, and had a conscience and something that you can't put into words, a kind of sadness, a depth. I know that there's this term showrunner, and that I go to editing, and that I hire people, and I do casting, and I direct sometimes. But my job is writing. My job is always writing. I start writing 3 months before anybody shows up. I start writing 2 months before the writers show up. And I never stop. And it goes all the way through the editing room. And that is my profession. I actually enjoy the state of being in that part of my imagination. And that's like, I can't believe I'm saying it out loud, but I really, it's a refuge. There's no formula and there's no genre. That can be very difficult. On the other hand, there's the freedom of not having a formula or a genre, and you can change the show all the time, and you can pay attention to different characters, different times. For me, the story is the hardest part, and that's the part that I have the most help with. So the people who are on my writing staff, it's really hard for them to write it. I get it. I worked for David Chase. I understand. I rewrite a lot. It's like really tough. You have to get the voices and execute things according to notes. There's a lot of very specific notes. But when you're in charge and you have the freedom that I've been given by the network and the studio, it's a lot easier to at least get a first draft. You're not as filled with doubt. You're not trying to please anybody. You're just serving the story. And then the irony is I give the script back to the writer's room and they give me all the notes. That's where all the notes come from. I don't understand this. I don't like this. I thought we were doing this. You could do better here. Why don't we do this here? Here's a joke. Here's a pitch. So nothing's being done alone, which helps. In terms of the story and like how are you going to construct a story and the organic nature of it without act breaks, without formula, it's been exciting and terrifying. And I have really, really smart people that I work with, and we always find a way to do it. Dan Bishop is like many of the department heads, a very close friend of mine and someone who is story first. I let Dan do what he wants to do. I am insecure about keeping him challenged. And I have gone out of my way to let him know at the end of every season that we're going to move ahead in time or something so that he knows there's more stuff to do. Or to say to him like, Don just got divorced. No matter what his behavior is, his wife left him. He has moved to the village, which sounds cool because there's young people down there, young girls down there, nightlife. He's been living in the suburbs all this time. He's moved to Manhattan, to the village in the early 60s. But his life is a failure. He just got divorced. He failed. And he feels that, and he's ashamed because he knows he brought it on himself. And his wife found out who he was and didn't love him anymore, which is his worst fear. What does that apartment look like? I mean, it's really about the relationship with the editor. And I've had great editors on the show, and we spend as much time together as the writers, and they think like writers, and they help the directors, and they help me turn the show into what it is. They really do it. Blake McCormick, who's a producer on the show and really is the king of post and all post problems. People have no idea how many special effects are on the show, clearing all of the clips that we use, picking the television and making sure it's right, what's on the TV, what the TV sounds like. All of that goes through Blake before it gets mixed and before, with the editor. So I'm surrounded by these geniuses, and I just kind of walk in and say like, can you make it louder? I'm a couple years ahead of Don because it took 7 years to get it made, and getting to see him go through the places in my life that I've been or where I am, getting to write about ambition and then achievement and dissatisfaction and shame, aging, love, fantasy, all those things in the life of all the characters. It's been ridiculous. And I think that what it has that is somewhat universal is that it's happening on a human scale. I know that the period sort of distances it in a way and makes it allegorical ever so slightly, but these are problems of jealousy, they're problems of love, that the scale of it is very, very small.